Hello, this is my legal rant of the day. I want to talk about executive orders and the Constitution. Does anyone seriously think Donald Trump or his legal team could pass a standard law exam in a constitutional law school course? I don't think so. Since taking office in his second term, Donald Trump has issued dozens of executive orders. And apparently he thinks that executive orders have the force of law. That is simply false. We need to go back in time and engage in a basic lesson about constitutional law and how our system of law works. Laws are passed by Congress or at the state level by state legislatures. They are creatures of statute. The Constitution is a set of constitutional principles that are the highest law of the land. Statutes must conform to the Constitution. If they are inconsistent with the Constitution, they can be declared illegal by the courts. The executive branch doesn't make laws. Let me repeat that. The executive branch, that is the president, does not make law. He cannot make law. An executive order is not law. The role of the executive is to enforce the laws that exist either in the Constitution or by statute, the laws passed by Congress. The executive is not supposed to make his own law. Now, there's some exceptions. There's something called a regulation. So in executing laws passed by Congress, government agencies and the president can issue regulations. Regulations, however, have to be consistent with the law. They can't change the law. They can't override the law. They can't overrule the law. Trump doesn't seem to understand this. If there are concerns about how to interpret the law, the courts decide those issues. It is the role of the courts to interpret the law, not the role of the president. The president is supposed to execute the law, not interpret the law. Now, with those basic principles in mind, let's talk about Donald Trump's executive orders. Donald Trump has issued dozens of executive orders that are designed to change the law, to overrule decisions of the Supreme Court, to disregard laws as enacted by Congress. The latest example of this is an executive order declaring that it is now a crime to burn flags. Now, the problem with that executive order, it is directly contrary to controlling Supreme Court precedent in the Jefferson versus Texas case. And interestingly, the Jefferson versus Texas case included in the majority decision Justice Scalia, the darling of conservatives. Justice Scalia even agreed that the First Amendment prohibits the government from banning the burning of flags. But Donald Trump has issued an order that declares it a crime to burn a flag. And he tries to justify it with all kinds of contortions. But the reality is that executive order violates the Constitution and it violates Supreme Court precedent. Donald Trump seems to think he is above the law. To put it bluntly, he thinks he's a king or a dictator. He is behaving like a dictator. His use of executive orders are the same type of conduct that we see of dictators. Donald Trump does not understand our Constitution. He does not understand the role of the executive, and he does not understand the limits on his power imposed by our system of laws. This is a very dangerous time, ladies and gentlemen. We have a chief executive officer who has no respect for the rule of law and is constantly ignoring his obligations to enforce the laws as enacted by Congress and as interpreted by the courts. Oops.